Good afternoon. Welcome to the March edition of CDW's ServiceNow Live Education Workshop Series, where we help you learn how to get more out of ServiceNow. I'm Kim Johnson with the CDW Solutions and Services Marketing Team. Before we get started, I just wanted to mention a few quick housekeeping items. We will save time for Q&A at the end, so if you have questions, please drop those in the chat throughout the presentation and we'll talk through them at the end. And after the webinar, you will be prompted to complete a short survey. We would really appreciate your feedback. It'll open automatically in your browser, and it's just a few quick questions. Our hosts today are CDW's John Manna and Tom Urban from Outcome Driven Solutions. John, the floor is all yours.
Hey, thanks a bunch, Kim. And yeah, as Kim mentioned, this is part of a series. So this is how to get more out of ServiceNow. And I think many of you that are logging in and joining us today have been on many of our other sessions. So we do this pretty much once a month. And the topics vary. And what I love about today's session in particular is a lot of what we talk about and do around the ServiceNow platform tends to lean IT in terms of supporting technology and IT and service management. We do a lot around CSM, external customer service, HR, and those types of things. But I love it when we carve out a section that isn't talked about as much, and yet the demand is there. So we talk to customers all the time. They tug on our sleeve about all types of challenges they have when it comes to source to pay, which Tom Urban is our speaker today, and he's going to lead us here in just a moment. So I'm excited. We were able to pull this content together. For those of you that attended before, you kind of know the drill on this. At the end of the session, a survey will automatically pop up, and we just ask you to please answer that. It'll take you to probably about a half a minute. We're going to ask to rate this session. We're going to ask you if there's any other topics you'd like to see us cover. We're also going to ask you if you'd like a copy of this presentation and some other things. So my job here is to kind of tee this up, and then I'll close it out with some food for thought, including a special announcement just to share with you guys about Knowledge coming up. For any of you that might be at Knowledge, or if you have peers that are going to be at Knowledge, make sure you hang out to the end. I want to share something with you there. But first, let me tell you about our speaker. Tom Urban and I have worked together in many different ways, going back maybe 7 or 8 years. Tom's focus always was, as part of the ServiceNow platform, anything financial. So if we had something that was finance related for our customers, Tom was our subject matter expert that we went and grabbed to help put together those solutions. And I'm talking about going again back 8 years or so. What Tom brings to the table for us is it helps to fill an expertise spot for us when the conversation evolves into things like what we're going to talk about today. And as long as I've known Tom, all of our conversations tend to start and end with driving outcomes. And that's what I love about partnering and working with Tom. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the mic over to Tom. I'll be keeping an eye out for questions over here. I might jump in here or there. And then I'll be here again to close out. But Tom, thanks so much for your time today. And I'll turn the mic over to you if you want to share a little bit more about your background and then get us into this great content.
Great. Well, thank you, John. I appreciate that. And as John mentioned, I've been in the ServiceNow ecosystem quite a while, about 10 years. And people look at source to pay and saying, isn't that kind of a new thing for ServiceNow? And it actually isn't. They've had different pieces of parts of this coming along for quite a while. And we've only focused in on a lot of these things, the procurement workflows, the financial workflows, the supply chain workflows. But source to pay is really exciting. And if you haven't looked at it, boy, you're missing out, because it really is. Let me just jump into this slide. So people say, well, what is source to pay? And this is really how we look at it. It's almost like if you think about SPM and IT budgeting at the front end, like, hey, I'm going to get this money and I want to make investments, and I'm going to have horizon planning and I'm going to have annual planning. So now I know where I want to place my bets. Source to pay takes that budget and helps you optimize everything that you're doing with it. So where am I going to commit my dollars? How am I going to spend my dollars? You know, am I doing a good job? How am I going to squeeze my dollars? Are there opportunities to really optimize that spend? And at the other end, we talk about asset management. So after I buy stuff, I have assets that I work on. And then the financial workflow in there is really bill of IT. And bill of IT is called a lot of things. It's called showback, chargeback, TCO. But it's where you take the cost of IT and you assign it to the consumers of IT. So source to pay is there's a lot in there. Like, it's pretty awesome in everything that's in there. We sometimes affectionately refer to it as Fred Luddy 3.0 because there's just so many things. It's such a powerful solution. And if you look at this, sometimes people will say, well, I'm going to get my supplier lifecycle over here, and I'm going to get my sourcing over there. And when you think about it, this really needs to be connected, because that's really where you get the exponential value, is by really leaning into the power of ServiceNow and connecting all those dots. So I mentioned that there's a lot there. I'm assuming most people don't want to stay here for 3 or 4 hours with me. So we're really going to drill into supplier lifecycle operations. And the reason we do that is because, interestingly enough, that's where a lot of people start their journey with source to pay. So you don't have to start at the beginning and work your way through. These stand alone, but obviously you get exponential value by using more of them. So when you think about supplier lifecycle operations, what is it? Well, I onboard my suppliers and then make sure that they're a good partner to me. So I want to make sure that they're compliant with how I run my business. And that's legal compliance. That could be industry compliance. There's a lot of things that go into that. Now that they're on board, I don't want to just have this, I buy stuff from them relationship. I really want to collaborate with them and help me optimize my business as we're going through it. Before I dive into that, what we want to do is start out by kind of understanding where people are with supplier onboarding and compliance processes. So if you could help us out, and I think Kim's going to be firing up a poll here.
We're just going to have people drop their answers in the chat for right now.
Oh, is that what it is? Okay.
And that question's in the chat as well.
All right, good deal. So if you could just in the chat, get back to Kim on that. So, where are you? Are you kind of at the low end where you're thinking, hey, this sounds like it might be something we could use? We've got a few clunky issues here that we'd like to fix. Maybe you're starting to lean into supplier lifecycle and the onboarding and compliance. Maybe you're at an organizational level, but you're still doing a lot of swivel chairing. And let's face it, procurement does a ton of swivel chairing. I mean, when you think about who interacts with more parts of the business than procurement, I don't know anybody, right? Because they talk to the users, they talk to the supplier, they talk to HR, they talk to the consumers. So they do a lot of swivel chairing. Where are you in that? Or are you a little bit more involved? Your processes are managed, measured, and controlled, or you're just thinking, I probably am not going to learn anything today. I just want to see if these guys know what they're talking about. So if you could...
Tom, just to give you a quick update. So we're getting some scores in almost across the board. We're seeing 3s, someone leaning 4, and somebody dusting off their honesty cap at a 2. And it's good to see. I mean, I think ultimately this is what we see with a lot of our clients. Occasionally we'll see a client at that 4 level, and it's fantastic. But for the most part, we're seeing that 2 to 3, with some spikes up and down. But it's generally what we're hearing, in the group chat here.
Okay, well, that's good, and it kind of makes sense, right? If you were at a 5, you probably wouldn't be here. So, hopefully by the time we're done here, you'll learn something. What I want to talk about really is a customer that we had kind of recently. They did security and infrastructure, and before they brought on the supplier lifecycle, really there's 2 aspects that I talked about, right? The first one we're going to talk about is where they were with their supplier onboarding and compliance. And so it was a bit of a mess. They were dealing with it over emails, phone calls, spreadsheets. They really didn't have, you didn't know if it was going to take you a week to get onboarded, 3 weeks to get onboarded. Stuff was lost. You really want to, when you're dealing with your suppliers, have a smooth, easy relationship. And they just weren't there. When contracts came together, sometimes they would forget to put certain clauses in, right? There might be compliance clauses. So this was a great opportunity for them. They were already a ServiceNow customer, which was good. And we came in there, and the first thing that we did for them is put in a supplier portal. So now instead of asking for vendors when they come on board to fill out all this information, they could just go to the portal, upload documents. Those documents could get scanned in, or they would fill out an application. And you can see here, this one, the license, is pending validation. So they sent it in, but that doesn't mean that it still works, right? It still has to be validated. Somebody has to go through that, but they know that. And what we can do with this is set up triggers and alerts. So what you can do is, if you're looking for a compliance document, you could set it up so that it goes to your main point of contact, but then maybe over time you widen the audience that you're going to send that to. So maybe there's a few people over there, or maybe you elevate your audience. So you go to their boss or their boss's boss, just to, depending on what they're looking for, how important it is, just making sure it gets in. And so we call them service nag settings, because that's kind of what they are. Instead of somebody having to call up and nag somebody for something, just have ServiceNow do it. Nobody really gets offended when ServiceNow nags somebody for something. Sometimes they're like, oh, geez, this dude's calling me again. I don't want to answer this call. And then the other piece is you can have different validation settings. So what is the threshold for insurance, et cetera? So you can set those in. But how do you get that if contracts and insurance, they tend to come in as PDFs, right? So does somebody have to look at that and type it in? Well, this is where you can start to use doc intelligence. And there's some of the, how ServiceNow is really leaning into AI. So this is part of one of their AI solutions. So we can scan in all these documents and it'll go through. And the beauty of this is the more you use it, the smarter it gets. So, we can feed it a few things so that it starts to learn. But over time, it starts to learn all the different formats and what lives where and where to put it. But then what we can do is we can move it over into tables so that you can look at it across all of your different vendors. Move. The other nice thing in ServiceNow is, you don't need a one-to-one relationship. So I may have like insurance that lives at a company level, but I may have contractors with different types of license requirements that lives at a resource level, but I need to keep all those things connected. So how do I do that? Well, I definitely don't want to do it on paper, right? I don't want to do it with a file cabinet. I want to keep that in ServiceNow, keep all those dots connected. This is one of the report cards that you can do with ServiceNow. So it's kind of slick. If I have expiring contracts with customers, one of the things that we set up as well is, how happy are our users with those vendors? So it's not just that they give us the best price. Do they give us the best service? That's an important thing to understand. So we can track this. How long is it now taking us to onboard a supplier? So again, these really nice, easy to read reports make life a lot simpler.
Hey, Tom, wanted to jump in here for the folks on the call, right? Many of these folks, most of them, in fact, are CDW customers, and they may be doing ServiceNow work with us, right? So we might be doing some of that for them and with them. But many of them are buying laptops and servers and software, and we are, in fact, their supplier. Hopefully, one of their top suppliers. This is why we are especially interested in this topic. Anything we can do to help customers improve that process of acquiring things kind of from end to end. And, you mentioned the magic 2 letters AI a little while ago, and you shared one example with the document piece of where that's being leveraged. Any other places that AI is starting to get leveraged, or anything you're seeing coming in the near term?
Yeah, so if you think about it, that's a great question, John. So a lot of this is getting the supplier onboarded, and there's a little bit of AI in there. Where it really starts to shine is, didn't mean to hit that, is when we start to talk about optimizing what we're doing with suppliers. So when you think about sourcing, you think about, because what's AI really good at? It's good at bringing in a lot of different things and giving you information in ways you might not have thought about before, right? You might have been looking for one answer and it gave you a different answer. So as we think about optimizing our suppliers and understanding I'm going to actually spoil my own presentation. But if I have certain suppliers that tend to not necessarily meet their commitment dates, right? Maybe they're over here, but or maybe they come in higher or lower, or maybe as we look across our suppliers, maybe we have 100 suppliers and maybe 20 are preferred. Let's say we have a great 80-20 rule. Maybe there's someone in that 80% or those 80 other suppliers that has made an announcement that is in the news about some new innovation that they're doing. And if we just look at this heads down, we're missing that. But we can actually pull that in and say, as you look into the future and what you're purchasing, you might want to take this supplier that you really aren't thinking that much about and see what they can do for you.
So getting a proactive approach, getting an edge maybe over competitors, things like that, because you can be reactive and look at the stuff after everyone else knows it, and after the data's months old. But
Right.
what you're sharing there is it can potentially help you find some diamonds in the rough or ways to improve your supplier situation without waiting for the data to
Right.
be in a historical state.
Right. Or maybe the other thing is maybe something's happening overseas where some component of that laptop you mentioned is delayed. That could impact what you're doing. You may want to think about maybe we need to consider other ways to fulfill our laptops. So it's just bringing in a ton of information and letting it tell you. I don't know how much people are using AI. I probably use it like 10 times a day. It's pretty cool what you can do with it. We're actually in the middle of doing that with one of our customers, which is, so I don't have a sample, but it's going to be interesting what we can pull out of it because they have these projects that they pull together where they're dealing with like 50 vendors on a given project. And it's making sure that they're, they understand when they're going to get stuff, what it's going to cost them. Maybe there's opportunities to pull things forward to take advantage of a rebate or a discount. So early days, but a lot of cool stuff.
Great, thank you.
So this is kind of their life afterwards, right? What they were able to do was push a lot of the work that they were doing, the manual effort, into ServiceNow. So the portal's there, things pop up. They have these pre-approved clause libraries. So it used to be that you could kind of look at a contract and see who wrote it because people just wrote contracts differently. Now they have this consistency across all their contracts, all their compliance. So, the legal team sleeps a lot better. The executive team sleeps a lot better, knowing that they're ticking tight on this stuff. But let's move to our other part, collaboration and optimization. So as you think about where you are in this, and John, I'll be honest with you, I'm kind of expecting lower numbers here than I was the first time, but because there's a huge opportunity here for optimization, right? So as you think about the low end, your processes are somewhat unpredictable, maybe poorly controlled, maybe you're just reacting all the time. Unfortunately, you just can't get ahead of it. Maybe your processes exist at a project level, but you're still kind of reactive. Your company's a little bit more organized, but you're still doing all that swivel chairing we talked about before. Or maybe you're getting more involved. They're managed, measured, and controlled, or your focus is really on process optimization and improvement. So you're really evolving. You're at that fifth stage. So are you getting numbers?
Yeah.
Or I keep going.
A little bit lighter. I think you can keep going. So far, just in that mid-range of 3. Yep.
Yeah, I probably should have answered the AI question on this one because this really is where the opportunity is to pull together a ton of good stuff. So again, this was that same customer, and we focused on supplier collaboration and optimization. So again, they had all these channels for communicating with people, and sometimes they would get an email, sometimes they get a phone call. They were managing things on spreadsheets. This is kind of that same old ServiceNow story where a lot of disjointed heroic efforts were going on. They weren't able to pull together a lot of their spend data. So there might have been savings opportunities that they weren't looking at because they were just kind of looking at like what was going on in the next 30 days and not doing some of those potential what if analysis, some of those things that you could even potentially pull AI into to help you with. And it created risk. So one of the things that we helped them with was supplier price benchmarking. And so what this is you pulled in all this information and you say, okay, these are identical products based on our definitions. They may have different names, they may look slightly different, but in our world, they're identical and they're similar products. So if you think about like a bullseye, this would be the next ring out on the bullseye. These things are similar, and maybe we could potentially group them, or maybe we could make them identical by having this information. And so now you can compare the prices across all those things, and you can start to see savings opportunities you might not have seen before. But the other nice thing with this is once you have all that information, you can start to set savings targets for things. So it's not just, hey, this is nice to have. Let's put our best efforts out there. And I'll show you one of the dashboards we're going to put in for them. And this is around supplier lifecycle operations. So full disclosure, this is actually outside of ServiceNow. This is a BI analytics tool that they had. But what's pretty cool when you start to do those financial workflows is you start to identify financial savings. So we were able to work with them to set out those North Stars for savings and for labor savings. And because this is real time, this is pulling in the information every night. So if you think about dealing with like a lot of leadership, they're not going to sit down and wade through spreadsheets to figure out where things are. A lot of times they look at this information while they're running from meeting to meeting to meeting. And so that was really the requirement for this. Give me something I can look at to understand where I am and where I'm going. And so what this does, if you look at those dials, if the dials are pointing to the right, they're in the green, that's a good thing. If they're in the yellow or in the red, it's going to need some attention. So you have your dollar savings on the left and your hour savings on the right. Where am I today? And if I stay on this trajectory, where am I going to end up? So this became really powerful for them as just a way for them to not wait until the year was over to say, gee, how did we do? Because that's what we see a lot of is people don't know until the shot clock expires to figure out what's going on. This gives them that opportunity to make moves before they run out of time. Oh, I kept going. Should I, did you have answers for me?
No, Tom, you're good.
Okay, all right. So this was another thing I mentioned, bringing in that certificate of insurance. We can also bring in contracts. So we bring in contracts and we can pull them apart to say, where are our discounting opportunities? Where's our potential for rebates? And this is another thing, price escalations. So sometimes there will be a price escalation that people forget about. And as you budget for next year, all of a sudden this price escalation hits, and it really is about protecting that budget, right? So surprises are always bad for budgets. So this allows you to proactively say, wait a minute, we might have a price escalation here. We might want to look into this. But I mentioned the AI opportunity here. Maybe that discount tier, I'm getting pretty close to it, but I'm not going to hit it by the end of the quarter. But I pull in next quarter's, the first month, the next quarter into this one, and bam, I get a discount that maybe that makes it worth it to float the money to pull that inventory in. And the other thing that you can do now is, you saw that last dashboard, but we can bring this in at a contract level to say, what is our year-to-date savings and where do we think we're going to finish? So this is really powerful for a lot of people.
Hey, Tom, kind of have a double question here for you. I'll kind of combine them. But
Okay.
I think at this stage, it seems like it'd be helpful for the group to hear what parts of the ServiceNow platform are needed for a lot of what you're showing, from a licensing perspective, what pieces, modules, things like that. And then are there prerequisites? So in order for you to do this, you need to also have X, Y, or Z in place. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure, that's a great question. So, I don't know if I would recommend starting with supplier lifecycle operations. We haven't seen anybody do that. But you can actually license supplier lifecycle one of two ways. You can either license it as a module, or you can license it as part of the source to pay suite. And the source to pay suite is actually a good deal. Like if you're looking at 2 modules, it's almost like you get the rest of them for included, bundled in. I don't necessarily want to say free, but they kind of are free, right? So if you're serious about this and you're really leaning in and you're like, geez, I'm going to do at least 2 modules, maybe 3 modules within the next 12 months, you're probably better off getting the suite. If you're like, I'm going to do 1 module and then I'm not going to think about it for 3 years, then maybe get the module. Prerequisites. So you kind of saw, if you're doing strategic portfolio, bringing these together, it really is a 1 + 1 = 3. Or if you're doing asset management, like where are your costs for asset management? It's a simple question, but a lot of times people are like, well, they're in purchase orders. Well, where are your purchase orders? Well, they're over in SAP. Well, one of the things you do with source to pay is you bring that information into ServiceNow. Because when we think about asset management, I like to say the birth certificate of an asset is in procurement, right? It's a purchase order, it's the birth certificate for an asset. So as we're optimizing those things, let's get its full life cycle and start measuring and monitoring it. And did I answer all your questions, or did you have another one?
No, I think that covered it for the group.
Okay, cool.
Thanks.
So bringing all this together, again, this was for that same customer. This was for their network equipment vendors. They had a lot of different vendors, and this just happened over time, right? They had a lot of different locations. They had some mergers and acquisitions. So over time, they just built up a lot of different vendors. The problem with that is you don't get a lot of leverage when you have a lot of vendors. Whereas what they wanted to do, and they didn't do this overnight, like as they came across it, they evolved things into different vendors, and they sat down with a handful of vendors and said, what can we do if we consolidate this through you? So it was very much this partnership relationship, because what's in it for the vendor? It's really nice to have a predictable revenue stream, and it makes it a lot easier to get you a better price. I mean, if you're getting 20% of their business, it's a lot easier to give somebody a discount than if you're getting 2% of their business. But the other thing that it does is eliminates a lot of overhead. Managing 80 vendors versus managing 50 vendors. So there's all these different benefits that come out of managing your vendors more efficiently. So here's the other side of that same coin, right? So you may not want to be overly dependent on a few vendors, because if anything happens there, what's your backup plan? So one of the things that we can look at is, are you over dependent on, let's say, now there's going to be times when there's sole source vendors, right? They're the only ones on the planet you can get it from. I get that. But what you want to do is do that consciously. Like, hey, we know we're overly dependent on this vendor, but we don't have a choice. And what I can see people doing is saying, well, wait a minute, I'm spending 25% of my budget with CDW. Should I redistribute that? And if you're asking that question, you're looking at CDW the wrong way, because CDW probably buys more infrastructure than anybody on this call, right? They just happen to resell it, but they deal with more vendors than anybody. They buy more volume than anybody. So bring CDW to your side of the table and say, look, you're my partner. You're my left arm. You help me manage this risk. Because what they do is then they'll go out and they'll look at vendors, because they're doing the same thing you're doing, right? They're making sure that they're not at risk from any different vendor, because they don't want that exposure either. So I hope that makes sense. If you're not looking at CDW like that, I mean, I didn't talk about it at the beginning, but CDW is really, really good at having those relationships with their customers. So if you're not doing that, look at them again. I mentioned this one earlier, but this is where I was cheating off my own paper. But one of the things you can look at, and the names were changed to protect the innocent, just so you know there. So sometimes you'll get an estimate from a given supplier, and you don't know if you should trust it at face value or if you should pad it or whatever. So if you look at Joe Developer there, the cost performance, it seems like when Joe Developer gives us a quote of 137.7, you should probably budget for about 154 because Joe tends to come in high. So you're going to try and drive him towards 137, but you really want to make sure that your budget factors that in. And all these they came out high. But if you also factor in the one down below, maybe, Joe tends to come in 7 days high, 3M comes in 3 days high. Maybe that's a big difference. Maybe those 9 days are worth the $220 that you pay 3M because maybe one of those is on this side of a quarter or it's on this side of a grand opening. Maybe your business is opening retail locations. Well, getting a retail location open 9 days earlier is a huge deal. So maybe that's worth $220. But having this information and this analysis inside of ServiceNow so that you can be consciously making those decisions, that's a huge deal. So afterwards, we showed some of the ways and that you can actually get here to collaborate more closely with your suppliers. But now, whenever there is that collaboration or communication, it's all tracked, right? Everybody knows what's going on. It's not that somebody had it over here, wrote it down on a note. It's all tracked. It's consolidated in one place. You have more strategic supplier engagements. So you have these opportunities and it's a win-win if you think about it, because it's better for your suppliers to be more important to you, and it's better for you to be more important to them. And it takes risk out of the system as well. So you think about that. You're lowering your overhead, you're lowering your costs, and you're lowering your risk. It's a pretty good deal. I mean, if you haven't really looked at this, or if you're looking at it, but somebody's not talking to you in that way about the outcomes that you can get from supplier lifecycle, you're not talking to CDW, I'll guarantee you that. You might want to talk to them about this. So kind of a net on this project, we set it up for a go live of 6 months. The first year spend recovery. So I showed you those dashboards. The first year spend recovery for this was $4.1 million. But the cool thing about this is that as you evolve, as your system gets smarter, that number goes up, it doesn't go down. So there's some things you do with ServiceNow where you get this year one big pop, and then it's not as big at year two because you were cleaning stuff up. The thing about supplier lifecycle and a lot of the source to pay stuff is the more you use it, the more you save over time. So year 3 is actually one of the most profitable years with source to pay solutions. It recovered 5,800 hours in the first year. That's a lot. And when you think about an FTE, how many hours they can do, bringing in 5,800 hours is a big deal. And because we're tracking that, we actually know the days to break even, which is kind of cool. If you think about the savings that you're making, the cost of your investment, when are you going to break even? Because everything after that date is found money. It's a pretty good deal.
Hey, Tom, I think it's a good time for this question. If you want to go back to that last slide,
Sure.
This particular case study you shared, a real customer, what was done, maybe if you could answer it for that scenario, that customer, or just in general, for folks in an organization where they don't necessarily control the decision to go and do an initiative like this, how do you wind up landing at the right desk, the right level, conversing with leadership about the importance and the value and these kinds of numbers here? So any advice, any suggestions? How do you typically see the path go to get to the right folks inside an organization? So for folks on this call that are interested in this, whether you're needing to go to leadership to convince them to look at this or to make the investment, because hey, the ROI might look great on paper, but everything does. You still have to commit that time, getting additional licensing, the man hours to implement. What's it look like to create that ROI justification?
Yes, that's a great question.
We'll
So
do that.
we've actually built out our own ROI estimators for this. So it's not that we say, hey, these guys save 4.1. Imagine that you guys can do it too. Nobody wants to imagine it, right? They want to know, hey, I need this applied to my situation. So we'll actually do this for free. We'll sit down with people and do a consultative ROI estimate based on their situation. It won't be me. We have subject matter experts on this. In fact, one of our SMEs, he was a former VP of procurement. So he's Six Sigma. He knows this stuff really well, and he can sit down and, given your situation, because some people, that number is going to be a lot higher, 4.1 million. I mean, we've talked to people who are north of 10 million on the savings. But when it's more than just, hey, we're going to give it best efforts and we think this is what we can save, but we have no way to measure or monitor it. So we can't tell you when we've saved the money, but we know we have in our gut. That tends to take a lot longer for people to get excited about. Right? But when we can say, this is how we're going to save you money, these are the areas, and we can actually drill down into it. We actually had one estimate we put together, and we do them in spreadsheets, and they wanted to look at our formulas, and they looked at our formulas and they said, all your numbers are low. So when we give an estimate, we try to be conservative. Like, we don't ever want them to say, okay, based on how you did your math, this is pie in the sky. We really do want it to be conservative so that everybody feels good about it. And then even with this, we'll say, let's knock 20% off of that just to make sure we're all heroes at the end of this effort. Did that answer your question? Did I leave anything out?
No, definitely. And in this particular deal, can you share how this conversation got started, where it bubbled up?
Well, this really was from the ServiceNow team, but it was one of those situations where it was very chaotic when it came to dealing with suppliers, putting those projects together. Like I mentioned, they might have 40 to 50 vendors on a given project. So they had a lot of moving parts. They knew they had a lot of moving parts. The question for them is, do I do this in ServiceNow, or do I do this with a one-off solution? And by the time they realized doing it in a one-off, then my challenge is integrating it back out into ServiceNow.
Yep.
Or just doing it from ServiceNow.
Yeah.
And ServiceNow is one of those, the more you use it, the more value you get, right? It's really is that 1 + 1 = 3, but then 1 + 1 + 1 = 7, and another 1 = 12. Like, the more you use it, the more exponential value you get from it. And so it became pretty simple for them to do this in ServiceNow.
Well, it makes sense. Especially when you talked about earlier, the asset management, the CMDB, those core components, assuming you're leveraging that at the ServiceNow basis. I know what we're doing is doing a lot of integration between our systems and our customers' ServiceNow systems. So as they purchase and procure stuff from us, it's integrated with our customers' CMDB, those types of things. So yeah, it does make sense. So that's great. I appreciate it.
We've got the eDocs. Do you want to do a quick statement on that? Because your eDoc solution is pretty cool.
Yeah, no, yeah, at CDW, we've evolved and created plugins and things that we can do with customers related to procurement, how they acquire things from us and purchase things, and automating the integration with that. And while we'd love to be our client's only supplier of stuff, when we work with the customer on their ServiceNow platform, we get it. They've got other suppliers. So whatever we've figured out for ourselves, how we can better integrate with our customers to make it easier to buy from us, to track from us, and to understand the value we're bringing, we plug that in and do it with other vendors as well. So yeah, a lot we can talk about on that. We might spin up a separate webinar just on that. But I appreciate it, Tom. And I know we've got, I'm going to put a wrap here and share with everybody here on the next slide or two some ways they can follow up. And first and foremost, as Tom goes to that slide, if you want a copy of the presentation today or a one-on-one discussion with Tom, just let us know any way you want. You can do it through replying to your email invite. A survey is going to pop up as soon as we close this meeting. Check the button there. But I also wanted to share one more thing, since we're only 2 months away now. And Tom, if you can go to the next slide, Knowledge. We are going to be there in full force. And I say we, the collective we, because Tom will be there too. And if we haven't had a chance to meet with you one-on-one, virtually or on site between now and May, happy to set something up there at Knowledge. If it's on this topic, great. We'll have Tom involved in that. But keep an eye out for a special invitation coming from CDW to all of you. for a number of things we're doing as a show of customer appreciation. And you should see that in just a day or two. And with that, some folks are asking in chat, a copy of the deck and all of that stuff to spark interest. Yeah, Tom R, good mention there. We will get you a copy of that. And again, anyone else looking for anything like that, just let us know. So first of all, thanks for everyone attending. Appreciate it. We're working on our content for the April session, so you guys will see that coming out soon as well. And Mr. Urban, always a pleasure.
Any questions that we didn't get to?
I think we hit them all.
Okay, good.
I actually did get one in a private message.
Okay, yeah.
Yes. So it says, Tom mentioned about bringing in the info around the life cycle of the asset from SAP into ServiceNow. How about the process prior to that, the creation and approval of the CARs needed for procurement? Is that a module in ServiceNow tied to this as well?
Yeah, actually, if you were there for like one of the first slides I had, it showed the 4 different modules within source to pay. And the first one is that the request intake operations, where you have the portal out there for users. So ServiceNow has a lot of different portals, right? They have a vendor portal, but they have a request portal. So you would bring that in there, but there's a few things that go on before you actually hook it into SAP that now with source to pay, you can really take advantage of. Because we've actually seen people, they'll take a request and they generate a contact, they place a purchase order, and then they don't even realize that the person who made the request didn't have budget. So it's like going to the grocery store, filling up your cart with groceries. You get up to the checker and the checker says that'll be, $47. You go, I don't have any money. Well, why'd you put stuff in your cart, right? So this checks for that kind of thing to say, wait a minute, before we process this guy's stuff, let's make sure they have money. Let's make sure it's what project it's part of. So there's a lot of stuff that instead of just, going over, shooting a request over to SAP to place a purchase order that you can do that makes it a more robust solution. Did that answer that question? Did I leave any part out?
I think you hit on it just great. And with that, that is the yes, I got a response that got it. Thanks. Appreciate you both, John and Tom, for being with us today and sharing your expertise, and appreciate everybody's time attending the webinar today. Please, a reminder that there is a question on the post-event survey where you can indicate whether you'd like to receive a copy of the presentation from today's webinar or the recording of it. Just let us know and we'll get that over to you later this afternoon. Thanks again for your time. Have a great day.
Thanks all.
Thanks, everyone.